Carson City Library Board of Trustees, and we'll set on to agenda item 1, which is roll call.
Chairperson Balderson.
Present?
Vice Chair Cranston.
Present.
Trustee Lucas.
Present.
Trustee Markle. Present. Trustee Nichols. A quorum is present.
Thank you so much. Let's move on down to agenda item 2, public comment. Any members of the public who wish to address the Library Board of Trustees may come forward and speak on any topic that is relevant to or within the authority of the Library Board. Do we have any public comment at this time? All right, hearing none. Let's move on to agenda item 3, approval of previous meeting minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review these minutes? Do we have any changes, updates, edits, clarifications, anything? I'm seeing heads shaking, so how about a motion to accept the minutes?
I move that we accept the minutes of the, when was it, October 28th meeting.
Good one. Do we have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And thank you. All right, next item up is, for information only, Friends of the Carson City Library Report. Not quite sure who to turn this over to.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We don't have a representative from the Friends here this evening. It was hoped that they might be able to make it, but it doesn't appear that we have one. Would you like me to read the report that was submitted in the record, or is that comfortable?
Do we have strong feelings about this board? If we don't have a representative here, we can just do our homework and read it, or do you want to go through it now?
I've read it. It wouldn't take long.
All right, well, let's move on. We appreciate, and we can certainly extend our thanks for the Friends to provide this report. We realize there's no requirement here. It is just a nice gesture, and we appreciate that. Let's move on to item 5 for possible action, 5A, presentation, discussion, and possible action regarding the submission of a $7,858 grant application to the fiscal year 2021 State Collection Development Grant Program, available from the State Library and Archives. Who's taking this one?
Trustees and Madam Chair, what you've got in front of you is it would be a mistake to call it pro forma, but it's basically the documentation that gets submitted to the state library in order to receive the allocation that comes from the legislature annually for collection development to public libraries around the state. More than happy to field any questions that the trustees might have, and also note that Department Business Manager Holt would be standing ready to go under that bus as well. She's worked through those details and I believe actually prepared this document.
All right, thank you. Do we have any questions for our staff?
I was just curious as to why this application doesn't have any money amount attached to it. Does it? I mean, maybe I'm missing it.
This is Joy Holt, Department Business Manager. For the record, it doesn't. And it doesn't require it.
So you just apply for it and they give you whatever they want?
Yeah, well, actually, if you turn to page 16, you'll see the letter, the declaration letter of what we've been awarded. So we receive this first.
Okay.
And then we submit the application. So we've already been given the award, which is sort of why Dr. Colgrove mentioned that it's a bit pro forma, because they determine based on their analysis, and they tell us this is what you're going to get, and then we then apply for it and explain to them what we're going to use it for.
Okay. Thank you.
And Madam Chair, if I may jump in, I might suggest that under that letter, it calls out Nevada Revised Statute 378.087. This may present an opportunity for the board to advocate with the legislature and with the Nevada State Library itself. On closer inspection of that statute, you'll find that that under the statute, the state is expected or can provide a grant that's substantially more than the dollar amount that you see in front of you. The sad fact of the matter is that for as long as I've been aware of it, at least these last 15, 16 years, the state has dramatically underfunded the mandate that it has set for itself in statute. So it could be as simple as drafting a letter to request that the state librarian itself, or could a request go directly to the director of the Department of Business Administration, requesting that as they're currently in the process of building the budget that will go in front of the legislature at the next biennium, that we respectfully request that they fund the full amount that's required under that mandate. That would dramatically increase. Under that mandate, the state could be sending the library as much as $100,000 or more for the collection, rather than $6,000 or $7,000. It would be a significant dent in our ability to build collections.
Thank you, Dr. Colgrove. Do we have discussion or further questions?
Could somebody explain a little bit more in the summary at the front? Per the statute, the library is eligible for a base grant of $15,000 plus a matching grant, and it could go up to $61,334. Is that a number of which the $78.58 was allocated to us? What's this other number for?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Trustee Lucas. You're reading it exactly right. It is a formula that says there's a base grant that may go up to of a certain amount, and then the library may be eligible for an additional grant up to that percentage of the amount that the library spends on its collections every year, which is, I believe, around $170,000. And so when you take those two numbers, the base grant that would be, I don't have the statute in front of me. Is it up to $10,000 or? So you have the $15,000 in the one hand, then another, I believe, 25% of the amount that we spend in the whole collection budget, and it's substantially more than the $6,000 that gets allocated. And so you're reading it exactly right, which is to say that even the base amount has not been actually funded. Not to look a gift horse in the mouth with the state, but I will point out that the state relies heavily on the contribution of public libraries in municipalities' funds to meet its own maintenance of effort requirement in matching the federal dollars that come in from the federal granting agencies. In fact, we're in the process of building that report right now. And so the argument I would make as someone that was in the seat of the state librarian is that we're really essentially, the state is underfunding what it says it wants to do for public libraries, and then relying on the support of all of the public libraries in the state to pay for all of the resources that they're actually then counting in the state's effort to match the federal grant. Does that make sense? I mean, in granting the requirement, the goal of the federal agency is to make sure that the state is also putting in its monies to support. And in this case, the monies that the state is reporting that it's putting in are monies that municipalities like Carson City and other public libraries and county libraries around the state are actually footing the bill for. And so I don't think that it would be a big ask to call the situation out and request that the legislature actually consider fully funding the mandate that it set for itself. The worst case scenario might be that they decide, well, we don't ever want to put that monies toward public libraries, and let's just lower the bars. So instead of the $15,000, let's say the maximum we'll give public libraries is $6,000, or reduce it to nothing. In that case, we wouldn't be any the worse for wear. But the potential for it to go up from $6,000 or $7,000 to somewhere between $60,000 and $100,000 makes it at least worth, it might make it at least worth writing a letter to the director of the department. And I didn't mean to take the conversation sideways, Madam Chair, but I did want the trustees to be aware of an opportunity potentially to advocate on behalf of the library.
I certainly appreciate it. Do we have any other questions, discussions, comment from our members?
This is Trustee Markle for the record. Is this, sometimes, all of this political maneuvering gets a little confusing and messy. But I know that in the past legislatures, the state library has gone to the legislature and said, you've reduced this, our amount for our state collection development has continued to go down. It used to be way more, and they don't seem to care that it used to be way more, and that now, this is what it is. So are there any, when I look at $7,000, maybe you could call it close to $8,000, but if Carson City Library is getting that much, which isn't much, how much are some of the smaller libraries getting? Are they only getting like $2,000 and $3,000? Which seems criminal, in my opinion. So I would definitely advocate that a letter be written. Again, it's one thing to get the request from the state library to raise the amount, but if you can get local libraries to continue to press their constituents or their advocates in the legislature, I think that holds some weight.
Joy Holt for the record, and I would just add to that, and Dr. Markle can expand upon this, asking Dr. Colgrove, that it has worked. That rallying cry and gathering of librarians and libraries from across the state did work to our advantage significantly, not this last biennium, but the biennium before last. So I'm guessing, Dr. Colgrove, you could elaborate on this, but I think it was a 400,000 plus one shot that was awarded and then distributed out to the libraries. And that was because literally the state library gathered the librarians from across the state, and every single one of us went and sat with our representatives. We went and sat with our senators and basically talked their ears off about the wonderful gloriousness of libraries. So it can be done, and because it was done not too long ago. So, but it does really take a village and, dare I say, significant involvement from the state library.
Well, and also, I've long believed that there's a significant connection between libraries, public libraries, and public education. And the state keeps talking about the need for more funding at the public education level, but they don't seem to understand that the public libraries can be an essential component of that public library or the public education enhancement for the state.
Madam Chair, through you to Trustee Markle, I couldn't agree more. You're absolutely right on each of the points that you've raised on this issue, from the minuscule amounts of state dollars that make their way to some of the libraries around the state, and also in terms of the state's stated desire where it wants to go. And often where this breaks down in the legislative process is that there isn't a clear mechanism that can push tab A into slot B. And at this point in the biennium, directors of departments are beginning to prepare their budgetary asks that will go, in the state library's case, of course, from the Department of Admin to the governor's office, and the governor gets the chance to decide what he's going to or she is going to recommend. And in this case, I think the stars are aligning pretty closely, because the department business, not department business administrator, but the Department of Administration's deputy director is now Matt Tuma, who formerly headed up the governor's finance office and worked closely with this, and he has good eyes and a good understanding of how this rolls. So we may be able to just clearly explain to him that the state has chronically underfunded its mandate under this statute, while the public libraries have stepped up to meet the maintenance of effort. I know that the maintenance of effort issue is looming very large in the director's mind, because she's scrambling to do what she can to get the hires in place to fill that maintenance that the state library at least has historically provided. If we were to present a letter, and staff would be more than happy to draft something for the trustees to potential consideration, we could simply remind them that it's chronically underfunded, and if you were to ask for this amount, that would resolve the issue. And the worst they can say is no. But if we were to follow that up along the same line with the Nevada Library Association sending out a call and rallying libraries around the state to begin pushing on this, we might make some movement toward, again, that tab A going into slot B, in getting it in front of the legislature, so that the legislature could then have the opportunity of saying, yes, we want to support our public libraries and we're going to go ahead and fund this. To be crystal clear, to actually fully fund this mandate for libraries around the state would be a tiny amount in the overall budget of the state library archives and public records, but it would be a tremendous shift in what the libraries around the state could do. So thank you for your consideration of that.
Trustee Lucas, for the record, what sort of a timeline would we be looking at if you said that you, staff could help draft something?
Thank you, Trustee Lucas, through you, Chair Knight. The timeline could be as short as a couple of days if you wanted us to draft it, and then I could send it to you separately for your review. If it could be it could certainly be ready for your formal consideration if you wanted to do it at this board's meeting in January, which, correct me if I'm wrong, Chair Knight, I think would still be in the window of consideration.
I think that's fine. That's actually something that I would like to address if the board would like to move forward. I would certainly appreciate however we get the letter signed. We've done this at least one time in recent memory when it was federal spending for IMLS. And we ended up calling a special meeting just for us to review, and then and that was very nicely handled from all of the staff, and I think we just all stopped by the library at some point to sign it when it was all said and done. Now, something like this, because it is more local, I think requires a little bit more commitment in terms of effort. So a letter is step one, but not the only step in my view. So as we're talking about, the way the state budget cycle runs, being on a 2-year time frame, what Director Colgrove has said is true, that right now state executive agencies are preparing a budget that will ultimately get folded up into a governor's recommended budget. Doesn't mean you got it yet. Still has to be approved by the legislature next year. And so one letter making it all the way to end of next year might be hopeful. So what I would say is that we write a letter, we get that ball rolling, we need to commit to keeping the ball rolling. So meaning that s- somebody has eyes on not only the agency request budget that ultimately gets sent to the governor's office, but then when it is at the governor's office, comparing that to when the governor's recommended budget comes out almost a year from now, to ensure, if that request made it in, if it made it from the agency request to the governor's recommended budget. If it did, wonderful, that gives you something to point to. If it did not, doesn't mean it's a goner for good, because you go through session and you can then ask for it to be added back in. So that's its own legwork as well. I'm not opposed to that. I think it would be great for us to engage in that level of advocacy. But I would, all that is to say that if we want to move forward with a letter, I want to do more than just a letter. Does that make sense? Okay. And you're right about the timeline, if that was your question. Is there anything, question for our district attorney, who is the legal eagle in the room, if we're talking about this statute? Is there anything that we've discussed thus far that you feel we're headed in a bad direction?
Jason Woodbury for the record. No, not from the discussion. I would just remind the chair that this agenda item is confined to the possible approval of the grant application that is this year. The discussion is and has been appropriate because it obviously relates to how the state has gotten to that number. Certainly, it would be appropriate to agendize more specifically some form of advocacy, if that's the direction that the chair and board wants to take for a January meeting. And I will assure you in advance of that meeting, I'll review the statute more closely, but I haven't heard anything yet that sets off a red flag for me.
Thank you so much. All right, and always appreciate redirect from our council. So if there's anything further on the advocacy effort, let's put it on next agenda. Is that so good to y'all?
Mhm.
I think so. Couple things as far as the letter, is that something we can request now? I'm not sure how far off topic we are.
As far as a formal motion needs to be restricted to just this year's grant application. I think you've given staff sufficient direction on formulating an agenda item so that you can take further action at the January meeting.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. And in terms of timeline, does anyone have, should I reach out to the State Library and Archives to get, because every agency budget has a slightly different timeline as how far, when they're gonna get their budget wrapped up and put a bow on and sent to the governor's office. So if it appears that that's gonna happen before our next meetings for us to discuss, and we need a letter sooner than that, who wants to pick up the ball?
Chair Knight, Todd Colgrove for the record. If you were open to just calling the front door and finding out what their timeline is and where they're at, that might be helpful. Both Department Business Manager Holt and myself are well-known in those offices and might not get as clear an answer or as straightforward as an answer as perhaps you might.
I'll make a call, no problem. Okay, so I think we all know what we're doing there as far as this particular grant application. Was there anything here that the trustees had more questions, comments, discussion on? All right, not seeing or hearing anything, so maybe, do we need a motion to accept or approve? Or is this something that, I realize possible action doesn't say I have to, doesn't say I don't have to, or I can't. So,
Madam Chair, I don't mean to
you
step in
prefer?
front of anything that our district attorney might be suggesting. I don't know that we need a formal motion to accept, but it certainly couldn't hurt. the application can be on its way in no time, and we would button it up by, if the trustees want to move to accept that application as is, then I think we'd be out of the weeds.
So I'm just the application says on it was due November 8th. So
Already been submitted, right?
how are we approving
Yeah.
something that's already gone through?
Absolutely. If I may, Madam Chair, through you to Trustee Cranston, the application absolutely was submitted November 8th. The paperwork that staff received from the State Library, because of its largely pro forma nature, was with a really short timeline. So we went ahead, I checked with the board chair, and we went ahead and moved it forward. It was agendized for this meeting to make sure that each of the trustees were aware of the action and the conversation. So to your point, it may be unnecessary to have a formalized motion to accept it or not, but I defer to your choices, trustees, as to your action.
Maybe we could have a motion confirming the application. Does that work?
However you're comfortable phrasing it, ratifying the application that was submitted, confirming it,
that'll work.
or simply approving it, just simply putting your stamp of approval on the application, even though it's already been submitted, as you understand. Any way you choose to go would be an
Almost
appropriate
like the
motion.
suggested action down there, huh?
Okay, this is Trustee Markle for the record. I move that we approve and confirm the state collection development grant that has been presented with our stuff. That we just approve it and confirm it, that the work is fine.
I second the approval of the stuff.
I know it's not very elegant, but
All right, all in favor?
I
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Motion passes. All right, let's move on to agenda item 5B, preliminary discussion and possible action regarding next steps to implement the library's strategic plan. So this was mine, right? This is the one I asked for. That's what I thought. Okay, before I get into my spiel here. So I wanted to put this on our radar. At the same time, I believe library staff will be going through in the next weeks and months, taking that strategic plan that we looked at and really trying to go into implementation mode instead of planning mode. And I would like us to work in the same vein. I think it's only fair, given that staff had a lot of work into planning. We dedicated a whole meeting just for planning as well, that we keep that effort alive and going. And so what I would ask is that this become another agenda item for us to touch base on in our next meeting and probably subsequent meetings. That trustees, I will ask you to review our plan again and look for what you think implementation items or next steps would be. These things would need to be concrete, measurable type things with some type of timeline. Not that I'm asking for you to be the one to figure out how the whole thing's getting implemented, but these would be things that we would bring to our meeting and then hopefully would converge with what staff has put together, similar to what we've done in the planning phase. Because I want our board to remain involved in the implementation and to have some ownership as well. I know that staff, my hope is that staff would appreciate having a board that puts some skin in the game when it comes to implementation. So that's the purpose of this item, and I'm happy to hear your feedback.
this is Trustee Markle. I agree that that we should continue to look at this and to work together to continue to move this plan forward. I feel very strongly that we need to engage the community and make sure that the community understands, knows about the strategic plan and how it can be implemented and how it can enhance the stature of the library. And I know I've been looking recently at some strategic plans from other public libraries around the country. And one of the things that I would really like to see is a small, not like this, a 2 to maybe 5 page document, and maybe even, maybe just 2 pages of something that is simple, colorful, eye-catching, that can be easily understood and can be used in a variety of ways, either on a web page or even posters in the library or handouts when books are checked out, because the life of the library is really dependent on the community, and the community needs to know that the library is actively working for them. So I mean, that's just, I think that this has been a huge amount of work and it's very appreciated. But in order for the community to digest it, it needs to be small and concise and compact and colorful, not just black and white.
Pretty specific and measurable, Trustee Markle. Thank you.
And I would like to see, and also measurable outcomes
Mhm.
that are both short-term and long-term.
So it sounded like, if I'm hearing you right, you want more of like an outreach type, something that engages the community we're supposed to be serving, or at a minimum lets them know, hey, we're working on this, and give us some
Right.
feedback, or whatever it is we want them either to know or to do, and we can flesh that out.
Right, because the community needs to know that that local concerns have been taken into account to determine those measurable goals and objectives. And it's just I've just seen some really nice things on other communities' library pages that are just it's real clear that the library is speaking to the community. That's all.
That's a great example. I think if you want to bring some examples with you
I
at
could.
your next meeting, love that. Anyone else have more to add?
This is,
Go back through it.
oh, sorry, this is Department Business Manager Joy Holt for the record. If you'll notice on the screens, I just accessed what we do have on our website currently regarding the strategic plan. And then further down, I will scroll down to show you that when this was first conceived in 2019, there was a shorter, brighter, more accessible, condensed version created.
Right, and that's just it doesn't really take away from the work that's been done, and I know that the strategic plan is on there. It would take someone who's really dedicated to to find that. But it's just something to we can talk about it, look forward to it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm looking for, is just to keep us involved and keep those ideas coming. And in terms of implementation, to say, okay, this is a concrete thing you can do. This is the measurable thing we want to see. And this is the timeline we want to see it. Not that it's 100% everything that needs to be done, but to continue to add to that conversation. So If nothing else is coming to front of mind, really, I just want to thank you, Trustee Merkel. I really just wanted to get the trustees, get this on your radar for next meeting. And I think that it's something that you can't really farm that out, right? Like you can get a facilitator for your strategic plan, and that's wonderful. But when it comes down to actually implementation and where the rubber meets the road, we don't want to farm that out. That's our library. So I can close this agenda item. This is really just what I wanted to have a conversation about. If there's no other comments. All right, let's move on. Agenda item 5C for possible action, presentation, discussion, and possible action regarding entry of the library into the Sustainable Shelves User Agreement with Baker & Taylor, the library vendor and distributor of print and digital books. This looks like this is a joy thing. Is this a joy thing? Okay.
Madam Chair, if I may introduce Department Business Manager Holt for this topic. It is a joy thing because it is an outgrowth directly from the oversight that she has been performing with the collections development part of the library. So it's something that I know that I'm quite proud and excited to have her present this and carry it forward, but I'm eager for it to be brought to the board's attention.
Thank you. And before I begin, I just want to give a kudos and recognition to our longtime collection development staff member, Rachel March, who has really taken a hugely active role in spearheading this project with Baker and Taylor and really looking for alternatives for recycling of books, alternatives to disposing of them entirely. We're up against issues with that because the local recycling facility stopped recycling books about 2 or 3 years ago. There's nowhere in Reno that will do it anymore. I'm kind of just walking you through the process that we've taken. We do use another company called Better World Books, but there is some inhibitions and limitations as to what they will take, what can be recycled. This is really the first of its kind that we know of program that they will take whatever we send them. They will take it and it's free. Best case scenario, they will take what we've got and they will credit us towards purchases. Now, Baker and Taylor is our biggest book vendor. We purchase most of our materials through them, in addition to our leased materials. So they will credit us, and we can use that toward purchasing more materials. That's best case scenario. Worst case scenario is they won't credit us, but they will recycle the books. And there's no limit to what they will take from us. This is also hugely advantageous for the Friends because they can also piggyback on our user agreement. And by agreement, that's simply what it is. It's not a contract. We're not agreeing to anything. We're just acknowledging that we understand their rules and how they want to receive items and what their expectations are, which are very, very limited, I would say. So the Friends can piggyback on our user agreement and also recycle books. And I can't speak to the Friends volume or inventory, but I'm told it's vast. So I think this would be a hugely advantageous thing for them. So that's sort of the long and short of it, is that this is a program that will allow us to recycle books for free. And we won't have to face any potential concerns about throwing books out. I mean, none of us want to do that, but we do have to weed. And it's just necessary, some would say evil, but it does have to be done. And without these types of programs that allow us to do that, there's no recycling facility. There's no alternative to throwing them out. And having experienced the reaction that that can provoke in a community, I would say that we want to avoid that as much as possible.
Thank you. Do I
So
have-
the
go ahead.
the pickup, they'll pick up the books for free, no cost to us. What's like the turnaround on that? Like, how do they get them from us? How much can they take at a time? Do we know any of that?
We don't, but it's according to Peter DeVries, our contact over there. It's really as much as we can give them, and they haven't given us any sort of indication that there's a limit to how much they'll pick up, when they'll pick it up, any of that. My expectation is that we'll be reasonable. For no other reason than to be considerate of the UPS driver or service carrier who's picking them up. But they haven't given any sort of indication as to limits to that. So, and there was nothing available on their website that would lend itself to that. And I think that probably has to do with, I would say it's a case by case.
No, I would imagine. I was just curious the method they were going to use to do it. If they were just going to, like you said, use UPS or something like that. If they have their own shipping fashion, or they say, here's a label printed out and slap it on a FedEx box or whatever they do. So,
Well,
I was just curious. more than
I'm
anything.
not sure, and I can say that this is a relatively new for Baker and Taylor, and I suspect through logical deduction that this has to do with the fact that Follett, who owned Baker and Taylor, actually let them go. So now Baker and Taylor is its own standalone corporation. They're no longer owned by Follett.
And if I may jump in, Madam Chair, to Trustee Cranston, behind the scenes of that, the concern that I would have is actually, even though the service is free, how much is it going to cost us to ship? And we've been reassured that that cost is completely covered by Baker and Taylor. And it will likely be in the form of printing the label like you're familiar of with FedEx or UPS, and they'll just pick it up. The difference is that there are two locations. The nitty-gritty details when we actually get into it is that we'll send them a list of all of the ISBNs of the titles that we're sending them. And then they'll tell us, these ones out of that list go to address A, the rest of them go to address B. And when Department of Business Manager Holt says recycling, it is literally recycling, because location B is Baker and Taylor's pulping facility. So those materials will be recycled back into paper that becomes new books. And so it truly is about sustainability for the materials, for the environment, and for the library.
How much extra work is involved in creating a weeding list and then getting it back? And, if you have a list of, say, 200 books, and somebody has to go through and pick out the ones that are good and set aside the ones that are not good. So you have these two piles of books. With my experience with Better World Books, I know that it's easy to, ship them out once you get the labels, but it's still, that's a lot of work to prepare the weeding list, pull all those books, and then go through them a second time to separate them out into two piles.
That's true.
I mean, unless you're only doing 50 at a time.
It's not difficult. It's simple and easy, but it is time consuming. It can be time consuming, but it's an excellent alternative to throwing them out, right? So, and I imagine it will be one of those things like with Better World Books, when you first begin that process as a library, it can seem daunting, and but then you get the system down, and it sort of then works as clockwork, right? So it will always be time consuming because of the multiple list, et cetera. But it is, in my opinion, so well aligned with our sense of sustainability and our values and purpose. So, yes, I don't think there's any way around it being, it's taken some time, but
Well,
time
it's-
well spent.
Yeah, it's in some ways, it can be a relatively low-level job as well, so that you can have a variety of staff people, different levels of staff people work on it. And, I'm just remembering all the thousands of books I removed from the state library. But if you don't do 1,000 at a time, it might be more manageable.
Yeah, we might be a little bit tainted from that
Yeah.
experience, Dr. Markle.
So, I think it's a great idea. I think that, I know that I hated throwing away books, but, when there's no alternative, and if Baker and Taylor can make this work, it's great.
And I would just say one of the things that I really enjoy about it and appreciate about it is that the book can be in absolute terrible condition, and they will take it. One of the issues that I've run into using Better World books previously is old textbooks. No one has a need for those. And in some cases, the facility who has them could be held liable for having old material that people will then follow on their shelves. So Better World books typically won't take textbooks or materials that.
Reference.
Right, exactly. So then you're stuck with no other option but to throw them out. Or if you're lucky enough to live somewhere that has a recycling facility, you can do that. We're not in that position, right? So this is awesome because we can get rid of those materials. We don't have a lot of textbooks, but we have reference stuff that needs to be weeded. And you'll see too, when you go into libraries, you'll see some really old reference stuff sometimes, and that's why. It's not that they don't know it's old. It's that they have nowhere to go with it.
And if I may, Madam Chair, through you to Trustee Markle, you're absolutely right. I mean, it is a lot of work to do any of these things. We're actively trying to work it into the process that staff already go through so that it doesn't add significant work to their day-to-day workload. But it's more of a feature than a flaw that there's more work involved with it, because it's part of our fiduciary responsibility to make sure that we're doing the right things with the materials, that we're not just shipping things off that aren't seeing use. We want to make sure that they actually are the things that should be coming off of the shelves and to make room for other new things that can go on. And so, yeah, your concern is definitely appreciated. And as someone that saw the amount of work that you went through, appreciated. We don't want anyone to go through that pain, but we do want them to be as careful as we can about it.
I have a couple of follow-on questions. First being, you mentioned we used to be able to recycle in town and we can no longer do that. Do you have any other background on that?
I can only speak to my experience actually when I was previously at the Carson City Library. We used to use, it was like Northern Nevada Recycling Center, I think is what it was, and it was out on 50 in Mount House. And we used to be able to go there, and they had huge containers where we could deposit the books. And we did those with our weekly hold run that we would go to Dayton and Churchill County and drop off books. Inexplicably, while I was still in that position 3 years ago, they stopped recycling books. They gave us, I think, maybe a month's heads up and said, we're not doing it anymore. So then we were calling around. I called Dr. Markle, can you remind me the place that we took books to in?
Well, we had thrift books.
Thrift books, yes. And then also grassroots books. I called them.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't take anything. So there's nowhere else. There was another recycling place that is in that same vicinity, and they don't do books. And you've probably seen a sign, it's something, something recycling. There's a big sign. And then I also called around Torino and there was nowhere that would take books. So,
That's interesting.
yeah.
I think it has to do with the sort of overload of paper needing to be recycled.
Mm,
You know, there's, you know, used to remember, of course, I'm dating myself, but the Boy Scouts used to collect newspapers and take them, and they would get money for recycling newspapers. And I think it's just become, it's become a big, it's hasn't become profitable, let's say. But Baker and Taylor, you know, it's a big company.
Well, and also I think it's really interesting that they have their own pulping facility because that's like that could address a two-pronged issue. One, the recycling, the paper, but also they're meeting the shortage of paper for publishing right now. I mean, that's a
It's a raw
genuine
material.
issue. Yeah. So they may have their finger on the pulse of the next evolution. Here's hoping.
Do you know how far away the pulping facility is?
I'm sorry.
Do you know how far away the pulping facility is?
I
or the
don't.
other?
I have no
Be
idea.
curious on our carbon footprint there. That's
Yeah, I
all
have
right.
no idea.
Okay.
Irma, for the record. So part of the issue with the recycled books is that there's mylar and plastic on it. So that complicates the recycling process, which is why a lot of places don't accept books. And if they do accept books, they'll only accept paperback books. So
Interesting.
that's one of the reasons why a lot of the places, Waste Management, Greener World Recycling, they stopped taking our books. So right now, we were using Big Brothers Big Sisters, but they've been kind of flaky on taking our books now. So just wanted to give you guys that
No,
information.
appreciate it. Thank you. My other question had to do with, you mentioned there's a potential benefit to the Friends here. And I realize you're saying that here, has that been coordinated with the Friends? Is that something they're on board with and happy
It has
about?
not.
Okay.
It was just a side thought, you know, that this could be mutually beneficial. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I
because
think-
they've got space issues too.
Yes.
We're all up against the space issues.
Yes.
And if I may interrupt, Madam Chair, the thought process behind this was twofold. One of them is to make sure that the board was comfortable with the libraries entering into this agreement before we go down the road of offering the service. And the second thought was that provided the board is comfortable and doesn't want us to rescind the agreement, it might be an ideal opportunity for Trustee Markle, who should be acknowledged for showing up at the last Friends meeting and reaching our hands out to actively engage with the Friends. This is a real pain point for the Friends, what to do with their books, as it is for libraries across the country. It might be an ideal way to really cement the bond between the board and the Friends, should Trustee Markle want to bring the news to the Friends and see if they wanted to opt in before any of us steal the thunder. And
Sure.
Sounds lovely, you guys. All right, do we have any other further discussion on this item? Questions, anything? All right, thank you. Let's move on. Item 5D, presentation, discussion, and possible action on Carson City Library Calendar 2022, holiday and staff development closures.
thank you, Chair Knight. And trustees, what you have in front of you on the print version is page 25, but it is the Carson City Library calendar as proposed for the coming year. And I want to lead off by acknowledging that this calendar, as opposed to calendars in the past that have been, I think, largely the work unilateral of the library director, this calendar is the product of the library management team, who met several times to wrap their minds around this and carry it forward. And we fully acknowledge that there are likely things that the board might want to address in these, but we're proud to put in front of you, this is our proposed hours for the coming year. And I'll defer the detailed reporting on this to Library Manager Reinhardt, who is with us tonight. I'm particularly proud, though, of the fact that this team decided to work to pull back the hours that the library has been closed in the past and expand the availability of the library. So not to steal any of Manager Reinhardt's thunder, but I think he's got some good news for us.
Thank you.
Sure. So this is Irma Reinhardt, Access Services Manager for the record. This calendar is, as Todd mentioned, increased the number of hours that we are open to the public. First thing you might notice is that there's no early closures or late opens. The second thing you would notice is probably there's fewer all-day closures as well. So whereas we were open 2,736 hours last year, or I guess this year, next year we'll be open 2,790 hours. Some of the things that changed in regards to late open and early closures, we usually had those around the holidays. I felt as a team, we felt like it was not necessary to have that many, an excessive amount of late opens and early closures, and just try to be open to the public as much as possible, especially considering last year with COVID and how hard that was for our community. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
I know I had a question. Thank you. I know I had a question previously when we had closed for staff development, how it seemed to be like on a Friday. And I had back then asked that, when we look at these going forward, that we kind of look at traffic to determine, when is the best time to actually close if we're going to have to be closed. Was that taken into account? And can you give us some details?
Yeah, so our busiest days were Wednesdays, actually, followed by Tuesday and Thursdays. The number one reason for that, or at least my feeling why that's our busy days, is we're open 10 hours as opposed to the Mondays and Fridays when we're only open 8 hours. So if we were to have a staff development day on those days, we would be closed for 2 extra hours, so it would be more impactful for our community. The other thing in terms of consideration was when staff were going to be here. It's less impactful on staff. There's more staff that'll be here on Mondays as opposed to Fridays. So that's another thing, is just making sure that all staff are able to attend the staff development days. But yes, the number of people coming in on each day was considered.
Thank you so much. Do we have anything further on this calendar? Yeah, it is nice to see it in color.
No, just a little further down.
To see the holiday.
Yeah, the black and white, it's hard to tell if it's
Like, which shade of gray is purple? Yes.
If I may, Chair Knight,
Please.
I'm sure that Manager Reinhardt could co-opt Manager Holt's display and show the actual charts of the days if you would like to see the statistics that have been analyzed. But other than that, I did want to clarify that the numbers that he's reported are exactly right. We've shaved back to make the library available essentially more than 5 working days more than it was previously. And that is at the same time while we expanded the professional development days that previously had been just half days into full day events, because we're fully in agreement that with the things that are underway and the changes that the board will want to implement and that the library is implementing on behalf of the community is going to require concerted and considered effort on the part of the staff to stay up to speed and to be on the same sheet of music. So even though we're taking basically 2 more days of staff time during the year to stay on the same sheet of music, we're still shaving off more than 5 working days to make the library available for 5 more working days out of the year. So, well done.
Thank you for pointing that out. That's tremendous, and congratulations, all of you. It's indicative of your priority. I should say that. The only other thing I would add here, and I don't know if I want to ask you to add it to this calendar here, or if it's just something trustees might want to make a note of separately themselves, or ourselves, I should say. But you've noted National Library Week. There are several other weeks throughout the year, poetry weeks, months, school library month or week, the banned books week, right? There's a bunch of these kinds of things all throughout the year that are nice kind of icebreakers in terms of advocacy efforts. If you're talking to folks, especially as trustees, if we want to make note of that, or if we want to ask to have it put on this calendar, that as we've indicated earlier tonight, an appetite and an interest to engage in some more concerted advocacy. It's a nice way to start a conversation. Hey, I'm going to wish you a happy library week, and also let's talk about funding this library. So if that's something that y'all want to either ask that we have added on, or if you guys just want to make a note, either way, I would just point that out. Does anyone have feelings?
Well, this is just an informational thing for us, isn't it? I
Right.
mean, this isn't the final thing that's going to go on the webpage, is it?
I think this is for your review.
Right.
And if there's no changes, then this would be, if I'm not mistaken, what goes on up to the webpage.
So you would have those, the closure hours and the open hours, that all of that would show up on the library's webpage calendar?
On the library's website? No, this never gets posted onto the library's website.
Right.
This would just be circulated internally to staff.
Right. So calendars, I mean, you do have event calendars on the website.
Mhm.
And I would think that that's the place where it would be certainly appropriate. And you probably already do some of that already, whether it's Women History Month or Native American Heritage Month or whatever. I mean, I think we're just wanting to make sure that those things continue to be highlighted.
Yeah,
right?
I think this specific week is just highlighted because of its relation to the state legislature. That's when libraries typically get a chance to talk, open floor.
Sure.
Yeah.
If I may, Madam Chair, through you to Trustee Markle, you're quite correct. This calendar that you have in front of you is the tool by which you direct the library as to which days it'll be open and the hours that it'll be open, and to make sure that we're on the same sheet of music. Staff then take that calendar to build out the library calendars and the pieces that are on the library website. To Chair Knight's suggestion, it may well be very appropriate to add other potential advocacy dates on this calendar, if only to make sure that it is on the trustees' radar, to give you the opportunity to suggest perhaps that the library may want to bring some additional signage on the website, or for the conversation about how we might move forward more publicly as a team, both the library and the board, to join hands publicly in an advocacy effort. We would be happy to go through and identify a few of those key dates, for instance, the banned books week, that we can add to this calendar and bring back as a tool, if that might help in visualizing how this might work.
What do you all think? You should turn your microphone on.
I like the idea of highlighting the various literature poetry weeks and days and special, considerations that they give to different types of, uses for the library. So I like that idea a lot.
I also, did anyone, I'll leave it to Director Colgrove. If you think it's more appropriate to keep that kind of a separate list just for, trustees to keep abreast of, if you want to add it on this, I realize this is an internal document. I think you know what's probably going to work easier for everyone. But actually, I think the ALA has a list of kind of like library holidays.
Yeah.
So maybe it's just as simple of if you want to send us a list, or we can.
We also
Don't work
do
on
quite a bit of promoting of various celebratory weeks like Poetry Week and Native American Heritage Month, Women's History. And we do that with a lead-in and then fairly consistent reminders on social media and then also on the website. So it might give everybody a chance to follow us and like us on social media and our Facebook page.
I think I see.
Or, I mean, our
Honestly, I think
website.
I see probably about a third of what you actually post that makes
Mm.
it onto my whatever my stream is, unless I go seeking for you, and that's just an algorithm thing. Unless you're going to start allocating money toward boosting your posts, I don't know how else. And that'll be, a far off conversation.
Yeah,
I'm
just
sure.
as a side note, that conversation is
right.
happening.
Yeah, good. Because that's the sticky wicket lately.
Yeah.
They have to make money somehow, right? No one's paying.
Yeah, and it's, it's
advertising's.
it's a full tilt boogie to keep up with it consistently.
Yeah.
So, and to coordinate it in a way that you're not spamming people with
Yeah.
your content. So,
Well, these observation days are a great way to, reach out to promote on social media.
right. Yeah.
It's a very common tactic, but in terms of whether or not, how we want that to go, I think it's just helpful for, at least it's helpful for me. I don't know about the rest of our trustees, but just going to have that list a little bit more front of mind.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you all for that discussion.
Do we need to accept this proposed calendar?
Thank you, Trustee Marco, through you, Madam Chair. I don't know what the suggested action or if there is one on this. And if there isn't, that's my mistake. I would have added that from previous items, previous agenda items from previous meetings. And I'll have to defer the question to District Attorney Woodbury as to, I believe the answer is that yes, you would want to accept it, but I'm not the right person to provide that clarity.
The answer is that it's entirely up to you. Approval of the calendar is not statutorily mandated nor statutorily prohibited. Historically, I believe it has been formally approved, but no legal requirement that anything beyond the discussion you've had occur, but it is appropriate for a motion.
So we usually, like you said, we usually do approve them. So I will make a motion to approve it as it is.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you so much. Motion passes. Thank you for your explanation, folks. Let's move on. Agenda item 6. 6A, information only, presentation and discussion of reports concerning activities and operations of the library since the presentation of the last report.
Thank you, Chair Knight. Todd Colgrove for the record. And my apologies to the trustees. You'll have noted that there is no print director's report this meeting. I only have a couple of items outside of the items that we've already discussed at length in this meeting. And along those lines, I wanted to lead with thanking you, Chair Knight, along with the other 7 to 8 individuals that showed up to march the length of the Nevada Day Parade. It was really quite a treat. And full disclosure, if staff walked about 4.5 miles, I'm pretty confident that you did at least 12 with the zigzag motion to keep the little one
Try to-
asleep in
yep.
the stroller.
Keep the
Thank
kids
you for
happy.
that. It did not go unnoticed by the rest of the city staff and the city manager. Thank you. It moves the needle on the dial.
Well, that's
Much
funny.
appreciated.
I
We
appreciate you letting me tag along.
Oh, no, the staff did show up, and we took the pedal library out and moved it along, and we were able to share that with the Friends. The Friends were quite tickled about that as well. As you know, that they funded that separately. Another line item I wanted to mention briefly was the turkey bingo event that the library held recently, just before Thanksgiving. I'm proud to report that there were between 25 and 30 individuals attended that, but somewhere between 6 and 7 families, and each family got a turkey out of that. And that is thanks in part to the Friends who showed up and delivered 3 extra turkeys at the last moment, because Trustee Markle was at that meeting and we were advocating for it. And lo and behold, they just showed up. It was really, really quite a treat. We're beginning to move the needle. And finally, I wanted to mention that the Community Works Experience Program, the CWEP program that was first mentioned in my report here in August of 2020. Now, here we are nearly a year and 2 months later, and we are just about, in fact, this Friday, I believe, Manager Reinhardt, our first volunteer under the CWEP program will be in the library working with us. So it's a success moving forward. It's well done. And again, thank you to Manager Reinhardt for pushing the string on that. There's a fair amount of bureaucracy and needles to thread, including getting fingerprints and background reports done. But it will pay off. There's no doubt in my mind. Other than that, I will stand ready, as will your other managers, to field any questions that you may have from their print reports that are included in the agenda item for your review.
You had a chance to review these, and did you have any questions? All right. Well, thank you so much. Let's move on. I don't see anything under item 7. Is that other administrative reports?
Thank you, Chair Knight. The good news is that we have actually identified the reason why this item keeps coming back to haunt, and it is because I don't have the permission to change that. We have identified the person within the city that can fix this problem, and we will make it, I will make it a personal priority to get this fixed before the next meeting. Thank you for
Of course.
indulging my repeated
Oh, that's all.
miss on that one.
All right, let's move on to item agenda 8. Information only, board members' announcements, requests for information. Board members, do we have any?
So I have one, and this was a few meetings back. I don't remember specifically when, but we were talking about laptops and giving them out to the public and the security of that. And I'm just kind of curious where we are.
Sure. So Irma Reinhardt, Access Services Manager for the record. Let me try to pull this up. So you had asked specifically about the Chromebook security and
Yeah, the Chromebook
MacBook.
security, the concern of people possibly installing their own software, malicious software that lingers on the hardware after they do it, the keyloggers, things of that nature, something that might make the next user vulnerable to an attack or make the library vulnerable to an attack.
Yeah, so going through the support website that Google has, it appears that the built-in software, it prevents somebody from downloading and installing something. They are managed specifically by Carson City Library, so they would have to have that login information to access and manipulate something on that end.
So when they return to the library staff is in control of if something was to come back and it was fishy, something looked weird, you get the ability to re-image them, reinstall software, whatever you had to do. You
So
don't have to
that's
work through city IT.
so that's the one thing that we wouldn't do is the re-imaging.
Okay.
Yeah. Basically, when it signs them out of their account, it it
Blanks
wipes
them
it.
out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Similar to what we use for our public computers, deep freeze.
Okay. So it's a guest account essentially.
Correct.
And it's after they're off of it, whatever they did is gone.
And it's the same for the MacBook as well.
Okay. And so that would mean the users, if they have the computer, and they're say they're using Word or something like that, they're saving their documents to it. When they log out at the end of the day, they lose their data. When
They
come
won't
back
be able
in?
to save it to the computer.
So they'll have to cloud save whatever they do.
Correct.
Okay. Cool. All right. That sounds good to me.
Yep.
Okay. And it was all. Is there antivirus on them?
On the
Where on the Chromebooks?
yeah, they have
MacBooks.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I forget the name of the one for the Mac, but the Chromebook has a built-in one.
So my only concern is a really dedicated individual will be able to get past any of your. You can't log in without admin. Like they can 100% do it. So I just want to make sure we do checks on these computers regularly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I to that point, the biggest issue I foresee isn't somebody that's really dedicated. I think the biggest issue would be just user error of not
Yeah.
signing out.
The number one security
Yeah.
issue: users.
Yeah, and then and somebody being able to access it that way.
Yeah, and that is a realistic concern. And the malware, anti-malware virus, all that stuff, that should prevent most of that.
Yeah,
But you never know.
Yeah.
So, but okay, it sounds like you guys are doing everything right by me. So, thank you very much.
of course.
I just wanted to ask if there was any progress made on a picnic table for the library lawn.
With the chessboard.
What?
With the chessboard, right? You wanted a chessboard too.
Oh, yeah, a chessboard. If,
Yes.
yeah, that would be the extra added thing, but,
If I may, Madam Chair, through you to Trustee Markle, thank you for bringing that to the front of our mind. Again, this is exactly the sort of thing that we want in the strategic implementation. Just between just us chickens here in the room, the answer is yeah. I mean, we're actually looking at it and we're working with the folks that have been making active use of it and trying to get a sense of it. The location, they've actually been pretty clear about what might work. The detail in actually moving that forward with the Parks Department and how much that will cost is something that I would expect to be pushing the string on after we've presented our preliminary ideas on this to the board in January and incorporated your input so that we can formally say, this is the word of the board and this is the direction that we're going and we'd like a formalized request. It's not just some random request coming from a library director that likes chess. I will say though that on that behalf, the library, the chess board that has been set up within the library is regularly in use. It's wonderful to see, and I don't usually see the same people playing chess there. It's really quite an engaging item. So it may well play out on the lawn.
cool. Okay. Progress.
Anyone else? I have one just quick announcement. This is kind of a process. But I am changing my name, right? So if you've heard folks refer to me as Chair Knight, just for purposes of the record or the minutes, it will be Knight, Knight, is my last name. I've got a couple pieces of paper that have it that way. I still have a couple more things to do. But just as an announcement, if you hear Balderson or Knight, it's hopefully going forward, it's Knight. So
I
that's all.
wondered what was happening. It's like Chairman Knight. Okay.
Who is this person?
Yeah, I thought I'd need to read the
I
the
know.
name again.
I know. It's, you know, it's not like they talk to each other. So, you know, you get that. You get the social security card has the name change, and then the driver's license has a name change, but it doesn't mean anything else in your world has that on it until you go one by one and encounter it. So, this process.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, that was my only announcement. Is there anything else? All right, let's do another. Let's move on to public comment, right? Members of the public who wish to address the library may come forward and speak on any topic relative to or within the authority of the library at this time. Do I have any public comments? All right, hearing none. Let's move on to adjournment. We're adjourned. I'll hit the gavel even. There we go. Thanks.